The rain whispered softly against the towering windows of the Varelli Corporation skyscraper, the city lights below glittering like shattered stars. Inside the boardroom, silence reigned, except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the far wall. Ethan Varelli, the 42-year-old CEO of one of New York's largest investment firms, sat at the head of the mahogany table, a man accustomed to control. Every move, every breath, every decision calculated. He was known in business circles as the Chess King, not just because he kept a hand-carved chessboard in his office, but because he played life like a game, one where he never lost. That afternoon, his mood was light. The quarterly results had exceeded expectations. His employees were relaxed. Laughter echoed faintly down the corridors, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Then came the moment that would change everything, though no one in that room could have known it. Yet the maid and the chessboard, Lydia. Jackson had worked in the Varelli building for 5 years. Every evening, long after the executives had gone home, she would sweep their offices, dust the desks, and wipe the glass walls that separated their world of wealth from hers. She was a quiet woman, early 40s, with tired eyes that carried stories no one had asked to hear. A widow, a mother, and a dreamer in secret. Lydia had once been a high school chess champion back in her hometown of Atlanta, but life, as it often does, had rerouted her ambitions. When her husband passed away and medical bills mounted, she left college to support her son. Marcus. Chess became a memory, something she once loved but couldn't afford to live for. That evening, as she wheeled her cleaning cart past the CEO's glass office, she noticed something unusual. The door was still open, lights still glowing, and Mr. Varelli himself was standing near his famous chessboard. A glass of wine in hand, he was laughing, surrounded by 2 of his executives, both of whom were in suits that cost more than her monthly salary. "Gentlemen," Varelli said, gesturing to the board, "chess isn't about luck. It's about control. You don't play the board. You play the man." The men laughed, nodding eagerly. Then one of them, spotting Lydia outside the door, said jokingly, "Maybe you should challenge the cleaning staff next, Ethan. See if anyone can beat you." Lydia froze, clutching her mop handle. She wasn't supposed to be noticed, much less spoken to. But Ethan, smirking, turned to her. "You play chess?" he asked casually. He's darted away. "A little, sir," he grinned. "Then come in. Let's have a game." The executives chuckled. It was clearly a joke to them. Lydia hesitated, unsure whether it was even allowed. But something in Ethan's tone wasn't cruel. It was curious, maybe even bored. So wiping her hands on her uniform, she stepped in. The first move, the men watched, amused, as Lydia sat opposite the CEO, her cleaning cart parked awkwardly by the door. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. A billionaire in a tailored suit versus a maid in worn sneakers and a faded blue uniform. Ethan smiled confidently. "Ladies first." Lydia nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the cool ivory pawn and moved it forward 2 spaces. Within seconds, Ethan realized something. She wasn't just playing, she knew the game. Her eyes didn't wander. Her moves were precise, deliberate. Every time he thought he had trapped her, she had already seen 2 moves ahead. His smile began to fade. The executives leaned in. "Boss, she's good," he chuckled lightly. Beginner's luck, but deep down he knew this wasn't luck. 10 moves in, Ethan was sweating. His confident demeanor cracked as Lydia's quiet focus dismantled his strategy piece by piece. Her queen cut through his defenses like light through glass. His knight fell, then his rook. He tried to laugh it off. "You've got some skill." Lydia's voice was calm. "Chess teaches patience, sir. Sometimes the strongest piece isn't the one you think it is." There was a subtle silence after that, as though her words carried more weight than the game itself. The checkmate 27 moves later. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at the board in disbelief. His king was cornered. "Checkmate," Lydia said softly. The executives were frozen. No one dared speak. Ethan blinked, then looked up at her. This quiet woman who had just done what no one in his company had ever managed. A maid had defeated him at the very thing he prided himself on. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. Genuinely. "Well played, Ms. Jackson," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated before shaking it gently. "Thank you, sir. Just lucky, I suppose." "Luck has nothing to do with it," he replied. The aftermath the next morning. Gossip spread through the building like wildfire. The CEO had played chess with the cleaning lady and lost. Some mocked him behind closed doors. Others laughed at the absurdity of it. But to Ethan, it wasn't funny at all. It was humbling. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in her eyes. Calm, intelligent, deeply focused. He thought about her hands, rough from years of labor, yet steady and graceful on the board. Who was this woman? He called HR. "Find out everything you can about Lydia Jackson," he said. When he learned about her background and the financial struggles, the son in community college, her chess trophies from years ago, something stirred in him. That night he stayed late again, staring at the chessboard. He realized something. He had built his empire on winning, on domination, on ego. But Lydia had reminded him of something far more powerful: humility, the invitation. A week later, Lydia received a letter, stamped with the Varelli Corporation logo. Nervously, she opened it in the staff break room. It wasn't a termination notice. It was an invitation. "Dear Ms. Jackson, I would like you to join me this Friday evening for a company charity event. Dress code, formal, E. Varelli." She almost didn't go. What business did she have being among CEOs and investors? But her son Marcus insisted. "Mom, you have to go. Maybe this is something big." So she borrowed a simple navy blue dress from a friend, did her hair neatly, and took the subway across the city to the glittering ballroom where the Varelli Foundation's annual gala was being held. When she entered, the room went quiet for a moment. People recognized her. The maid. Some whispered. Some smirked. Then Ethan Varelli walked up to her and smiled warmly. "Ms. Jackson, I'm glad you came." He led her through the crowd, ignoring the puzzled stares. At the center of the ballroom stood a large chessboard. Not decorative this time, but real. With pieces arranged for play, Ethan turned to the microphone and spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're raising funds for our mentorship program, helping underprivileged students access education. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce someone who reminded me what intelligence, perseverance, and dignity truly look like." He gestured to Lydia. "This is Lydia Jackson, one of our building's custodians. Last week she beat me fair and square at chess, and in doing so she taught me a lesson about humility and human potential." The audience gasped, some in disbelief, others in admiration. Ethan continued. "So tonight I'd like to announce something special. Starting next month, the Varelli Foundation will sponsor a scholarship program in her name. The Jackson Initiative, to support working-class parents who want to continue their education or help their children achieve theirs." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. The audience erupted into applause. The speech, when the noise died down, Ethan turned to her. "Would you like to say something?" Lydia trembled as she took the microphone. "I don't know what to say," she began softly. "I never thought anyone would notice me. I've spent most of my life cleaning up after people who didn't even see I was there. But that day when you asked me to play, I remembered who I was. Not just a maid, but a woman who once had dreams." She paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. "My late husband used to tell me, 'Lydia, life's like a chess game. Sometimes you start as a pawn, but that doesn't mean you can't reach the other side and become a queen.' I finally understand what he meant." The room was silent except for the sound of muffled sobs. Even Ethan's eyes glistened. The transformation over the following months. Lydia's life transformed. She was promoted to a position within the Varelli Foundation, helping manage community outreach programs. She became the face of the new scholarship fund, which provided education opportunities for dozens of struggling families. Ethan and Lydia often met to play chess in the CEO's office. But the games were no longer about winning. They talked about life, loss, resilience, and hope. He admired her wisdom, her quiet strength. She saw in him something rare, a man willing to learn. And though they came from different worlds, they shared a belief that people are not defined by their titles, but by their hearts. The return game one evening, months later, Ethan invited her to his office again. Rematch? he said with a grin. Lydia laughed. You sure you're ready to lose again? They played for an hour, the city lights painting golden reflections across the board. This time, Ethan put up a better fight. But in the end, Lydia cornered his king again. Checkmate, she whispered. Ethan smiled. I suppose I should stop underestimating you. She looked at him thoughtfully. You never underestimated me, sir. You just didn't see me. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, her words sinking deep. That night after she left, he stared out over the glittering skyline and thought about how a single game, a simple act of curiosity, had changed everything. It had reminded him that brilliance can come from anywhere, that greatness hides in plain sight. Years later, 2 years later, at a grand auditorium filled with students and families, Lydia stood on stage as the keynote speaker for the annual Jackson Initiative Scholarship Ceremony. Behind her, a massive banner read, Dream boldly. Move bravely. Her son Marcus sat in the front row, now a college graduate, his eyes full of pride. She spoke to the crowd with the same calm grace that had once silenced a boardroom. I used to think life dealt me a losing hand, she said. But now I see that every piece has a purpose. Every struggle prepares you for your next move. The key is not where you start, but how you play. The audience rose in a standing ovation. At the back of the room, Ethan Varelli smiled quietly, clapping with genuine admiration. He didn't see a maid anymore. He saw a mentor, a symbol, a queen who had crossed the board of life. The final move that evening, after the ceremony, Lydia found Ethan near the chessboard displayed in the lobby, the same one they had played on years ago. She smiled. You know, I think you let me win that first night, he chuckled. You know very well I didn't. They shared a laugh, then stood in comfortable silence. Finally, Lydia said, Funny how life works, isn't it? You thought you were playing a game that night. Turns out it was destiny playing you. Ethan nodded. Checkmate. They both laughed softly. Two unlikely friends bound by a single moment of humility. And a single game that changed two lives forever. Epilogue. The legacy years later, thousands of students would graduate under the Jackson Initiative. Some would become teachers, engineers, doctors, artists, each one carrying forward the light that began with one woman and one simple game of chess. In the halls of the Varelli Foundation, a plaque hung proudly on the wall, in honor of Lydia Jackson, who reminded us that greatness has no uniform. And somewhere, in a quiet office overlooking the city, a chessboard sat waiting, a timeless reminder that sometimes the most powerful moves come from the most unexpected players. 10 years had passed since that first game, the night the CEO invited his maid to play chess as a joke. The world had changed since then, but so had they. The Varelli Foundation had grown into a nationwide movement. Dozens of cities now hosted Jackson Centers, community hubs that provided mentorship, free education programs, and skill-building workshops for single parents and underprivileged youth. Lydia's name had become synonymous with resilience. Her face appeared on magazine covers, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol, proof that dignity and brilliance could rise from anywhere. Yet, for all the success, Lydia remained the same woman who once pushed a cleaning cart through corporate hallways. She still lived in her modest home in Queens, still volunteered at her local church, still brewed her morning tea in the same chipped mug that had carried her through her hardest nights. Her son, Marcus, now worked as a social worker, inspired by the values his mother had embodied all her life. He would often tell her, Mom, you didn't just change my life. You changed hundreds of lives. You became the move that turned the whole game around. She would smile softly and reply, I just moved one piece at a time, baby. That's all any of us can do. A visit from an old friend one gray morning in autumn. As golden leaves drifted across the street outside her home, Lydia heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, she froze, and then smiled warmly. Mr. Varelli, she said. Ethan stood there, older now, a few more gray streaks in his hair, but the same kind eyes. He held a small box in his hand. Just Ethan, he said. I came to see how my favorite chess partner is doing. Lydia laughed. Still undefeated. He stepped inside, glancing around at the cozy living room. On the mantel sat a framed photo of the two of them at the first scholarship ceremony. He smiled softly. "You kept that picture?" "Of course," she said. It was the day I realized my life could still surprise me. They sat together, sipping tea, reminiscing about old days. The first game, the gala, the countless nights spent planning charity programs. The world outside felt distant, as if time had paused just for them. After a while, Ethan placed the small box on the table and pushed it toward her. "Open it," he said. Inside was a hand-carved wooden queen chess piece, ivory and mahogany polished to perfection. The same style as the one from his original set. "I had this piece replaced," he said quietly. "The night you beat me, I lost the queen. It cracked when I hit the board too hard." He chuckled softly. "I kept the broken one all these years as a reminder that arrogance breaks faster than wood." Lydia's eyes welled with tears. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently, "because you taught me something I couldn't learn in boardrooms or books. You taught me how to see people, to understand that genius doesn't wear a suit, sometimes it wears a name tag." She smiled, her voice trembling. "And you taught me something too. That kindness can come from the most unexpected places, even from a man who once thought life was just a game." The unseen ripples months later, Ethan passed away quietly in his sleep. The news made headlines across the country. Philanthropist and CEO Ethan Varelli dies at 54. Tributes poured in from around the world. But one note found in his office after his passing captured the truth of his legacy more than any speech ever could. It was written in his familiar handwriting, folded neatly beside the chessboard. "The greatest victory I ever had was the day I lost to Lydia Jackson." When Lydia was invited to speak at his memorial service, she stood before the crowd, executives, workers, students, and janitors alike. Her voice was steady, full of grace. "I met Ethan on a day when I was invisible," she began. "But he made a move that changed everything, not just for me, but for countless others. And in doing so, he proved that real kings don't rule from thrones. They lead from the heart." Tears shimmered in the eyes of the audience. When she stepped down from the stage, she placed the wooden queen beside his photograph, whispering, "Checkmate, my friend." Legacy beyond the board years passed, and the Jackson Initiative continued to grow. Lydia became known simply as Miss Jackson, the mentor everyone wanted to meet. She spent her last years teaching chess to children in community centers, using the game as a metaphor for life. "Every move counts," she would tell them, "even the small ones, especially the small ones." Her students adored her. They called her Coach Queen. One of them, a quiet young girl named Amira, became particularly close to her, a mirror of Lydia's younger self, humble, curious, and full of potential. One afternoon, after a lesson, Amira asked, "Miss Jackson, how did you get so good at chess?" Lydia smiled. "Because I learned to play with life before I ever learned to play with pieces." The little girl thought for a moment, then whispered, "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Lydia chuckled, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, baby, you're gonna be better." The final lesson when Lydia passed away peacefully years later. The world mourned her not as a maid, but as a teacher, a visionary, and a woman who had turned a moment of mockery into a movement of compassion. At her funeral, held in the grand hall of the Varelli Foundation, the same chessboard from that fateful night was displayed near her casket. The queen piece, or the one Ethan had given her, rested beside it. Marcus, now a father himself, stepped up to speak. "My mother taught me that no matter where you start, your value isn't determined by what you have, but by what you give." She played life like chess, with patience, courage, and love. And in the end, she didn't just win the game. She changed it. As the ceremony ended, hundreds of students, past scholarship recipients, placed single white chess pieces on her casket, one by one, until it was covered in a sea of ivory light. A generation inspired decades later. At a museum exhibit dedicated to ordinary people who changed the world, one display stood out. It showed an old wooden chessboard, 2 worn-down chairs, and a simple plaque that read, "A CEO invited his maid to play chess as a joke. She made a move that changed the world." Visitors would often pause there the longest, moved by the story, the humanity, the message, and somewhere, In the unseen folds of eternity, perhaps two familiar souls sat across from each other once more. The businessman and the maid, playing their eternal game, smiling as they remembered the night a single act of humility turned into a lifelong checkmate of the heart. It was a bright spring morning in New York City, years after Lydia Jackson's passing, when a group of children filed excitedly into the new Jackson Varelli Youth Center. The building stood tall in Harlem, sunlight spilling through its glass walls, its entrance adorned with a bronze sculpture of a queen chess piece rising above a board. Below it, etched into marble, were the words, "Every move counts." Inside, the air buzzed with laughter and life. The smell of new books, fresh paint, and dreams filled the air. In the main hall, portraits of Lydia Jackson and Ethan Varelli hung side by side, not as Maid and CEO, but as equals. Beneath their images read a shared quote, "It takes both the powerful and the humble to change the world." The young girl in the game. Among the students that morning was a young girl named Amira Williams, now a teenager, confident and bright-eyed. She wore a simple t-shirt that read Coach Queen's Academy, and in her hands she carried a worn-out chessboard, the same one Lydia had once used to teach her. The pieces were mismatched, some cracked, but to Amira they were priceless. Today she was teaching her first chess class. The kids gathered around, restless but curious. "Miss Amira," one boy asked, "why are we learning chess?" "It's old and slow," Amira smiled, setting up the board. "Because chess isn't just about winning. It's about seeing yourself, your next move, and how your actions affect others." She pointed to the queen. "You know what Miss Jackson used to tell me. The queen starts small, just like everyone else. But if she's patient and brave, she can go anywhere." The children quieted. There was something in her tone, reverent, warmth, that made them listen. A visitor from the past as the class continued. A man stood quietly at the doorway, silver-haired, well-dressed, holding a bouquet of white lilies. He watched Amira with a faint smile before stepping forward. When she looked up, her face lit with recognition. "Mr. Marcus," she exclaimed, rushing over. Marcus Jackson, Lydia's son, was now in his 60s, but his eyes still carried that same spark of his mother's kindness. He handed her the flowers. "For you and for her," he said softly. Amira's throat tightened. "She'd be proud, you know. Everything here. It's because of her." Marcus nodded, his gaze sweeping over the children. "She'd say it's because of you. She believed every generation has its move to make." He paused, looking at the chessboard. "She always said, you don't need a crown to be a queen. Just courage." A hidden letter later that day, as Amira was cleaning up after class, she noticed something tucked into the lining of Lydia's old chessboard case. A yellowed envelope with faded handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully unfolded it. It read, "To whoever holds this board next, if you are reading this, it means you are continuing the game. Remember, it's not about winning. It's about teaching others how to play with honor, courage, and kindness. Every pawn has a destiny. Every queen has a purpose. Make your move count. Lydia Jackson." Tears welled in Amira's eyes as she read the final line. "And when life challenges you, look your fear in the eyes, smile, and whisper, 'Checkmate.'" She folded the letter carefully and placed it back, her fingers trembling, not from sadness, but from awe. Lydia's voice seemed to echo softly in the room, as if the walls themselves remembered her. The circle completes that evening. The youth center held a community event. Parents, students, and local leaders gathered to celebrate its first anniversary. Marcus Jackson stood on stage, beside Amira, addressing the crowd. "Many years ago," he began, "my mother played a game of chess she wasn't supposed to win. But that game wasn't really about chess at all. It was about faith. Faith that every person, no matter their station, carries a light that can change the world." He looked at the children seated in the front row, their eyes wide. "She once told me, the game never ends as long as someone else is still learning how to move." He smiled. "And today, seeing all of you here, I know it never will." Applause filled the hall, thunderous, heartfelt, alive. One last game later that night. After the celebration ended, Amira found herself alone in the main hall. She set up Lydia's old chessboard under the soft glow of the overhead lights. Then she whispered, almost as if speaking to the air, "Miss Jackson, shall we play?" A faint breeze stirred through the open window. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed softly, alive with countless unseen moves and second chances. Amira smiled, touching the queen piece. "I'll keep playing," she murmured. "Just like you taught me." She moved the pawn forward 2 spaces, and though the board was silent, she could almost hear Lydia's voice, calm, wise, and full of love. "Good move. Baby, now keep going." The final message outside the center. The bronze queen sculpture shimmered in the moonlight. Beneath it, a new engraving had been added just that morning, one that captured the spirit of the entire story. She started as a maid. She became a teacher. And through her lessons, she made the world her chessboard. In the end, Lydia Jackson's greatest move wasn't the one that defeated a CEO. It was the one that awakened compassion in thousands. The one that proved that brilliance has no uniform, and kindness has no hierarchy. Because sometimes, the smallest move, made by the most underestimated player, is the one that changes the entire game. Legacy, hope, equality, inspiration.